Good morning to everyone joining us online. I'm Britt and McDowell. You are joining us here at Radcliff Christian Church, and thank you for being here, and thank you for everyone that's here. It's funny as I watch the clipboard make its way around for our Thanksgiving dinner on, what is it, the 16th? Is the 16th? Is that when it is, Barb? At 5 p.m. People are checking off what they list. I did catch it early, so I'm not going to get it last. So I get to make my specialties at least. Or I will, or Georgia will, one of us. So if you don't mind, please share, check in, like the church page, and pass this along. My mama asked me to send it to her every week. I think she's spoiled, but it reminds her that we've got what we've got going on. So I send it. Michelle's at home this morning, and sit there and send that out to them. I like to do that on Messenger, so that way they get a little irritating ding just for me. So always being ever present, right? Sometimes with mamas and wives, you got to do that. At least that's what I will do until someone tells me not to. Not that I like to give anybody a hard time or anything. So first off, I want to, if you didn't make it to the trunk or treat, you missed out. We had a great time last night. It was a great service to our community, and Matt and Rachel did a fantastic job organizing. Then everybody's, you stood up and you showed up and you showed out. So that I'm always thankful, and it's a great reminder of what we stand for as a church. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the sermon this morning. So I want to start with a good, thought-provoking question. Now, be very careful in your response, and I want to make sure you hear the question. All right? Not have you been convicted, but would you be convicted? If someone were to go through your life, your online presence, your phone, your bank account, your closet, your wardrobe, what would you be convicted of? So I guess the real question is, what's important to you? Would you be convicted of being a sports fan? Is there a certain team that you're maybe a little, not a fan of, but maybe a fanatic? Now I'm starting to step on toes. I'm going to get told I'm meddling again. But I know somebody that's got some paraphernalia of a sports team here today. Or would you be convicted of what your job is? They're going to find Steve's white coat and a stethoscope. Or Carla's lesson plan book to know that she's a teacher. I have found that if you want to know what somebody is about, the easiest way to do it is look at their bank account. That tells you where they spend their money. So obviously, if you were to check my bank account, you would know I'm a glutton. I like to eat. I've got all kinds of stuff online about food, and that's my hobby. That and golf and French bulldogs and books that I buy that I think will be great that I never read. I've got a stack this big that's sitting there. But I ask the question, would you ever be convicted of being a follower of Jesus? Or being a Christian, or being a religious person? I have a problem with the religious label. I don't like people to know that I'm religious. I don't want the extra accountability. And I would argue that I'm not very religious anyway. I'm more on the other side of things. But if people started going through and they started looking at the summation of who you are based on what you've left behind, shall we call it the fruit that you bared, what conclusions would they come to? There's a good twist coming on this, so you'll understand. I was at Walmart the other day, and I saw a young lady. When I say young lady, I think she was my age, so it's young in proportion to the congregation. I'm the baby here by a lot, like 10%. So I mean, that's just the way it is. So we'll call her younger. I mean, I'm the youngest one in all my circles. At the Red Brick Cottage, all my friends, I'm the youngest one. So I don't know what that means. But I've always liked being around more mature people. See, I saved it. I didn't call you old. Go with it. But I was at Walmart, and I saw a young lady and her, I presume, boyfriend, husband, significant other. And she had a shirt on that said, "I'm a Jesus-loving girl." I was like, interesting. And I got to thinking about it. That sometimes as believers, we use the bumper stickers and the t-shirts and the Facebook statuses and the scriptures in our profile to tell people what we are. But then we don't necessarily have alignment in what we say versus what we produce. And that's a big problem in the Christian world today. That we have a small minority of believers, of the 2.5 billion that are on the planet, about 25% of the people on the planet are Christian, which is really interesting to think about when you break it down to percentages. That there's 75% that fall in the other category. But I saw this girl, and she's wearing I'm a Jesus girl, or I'm a Jesus-loving girl, whatever it was. It was pink and white, and then I proceeded to see her absolutely shred a Walmart cashier. And I think that is the most accurate analogy for how much of the world views the religious people. And I would almost say the plot twist is going to come is when it comes to looking at you and you're on trial for being a follower of Jesus. I would almost say that the better you are at it, the less evidence that there is. Because when you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you're loving and you're serving, you don't have to have a bumper sticker. You don't have to have a t-shirt. You don't have to have those things, because the fruits of your life speak for themselves. I want you to think about your friends. And I'm not encouraging you to judge them by any means, because we are all flawed, imperfect, mortal beasts. But how many of you have people on your friends list that if you were to call them today because you're broke down somewhere, that you know they would show up if it was within their power? And now here's the next question. Or they'd say, "What can I do? What do you need me to do?" You know, Dottie messaged me one night. I'm not bragging. She messaged me. She was broke down on the side of the road and everything else, and she was having a moment. I found out where she was. I said, "Well, what do you need me to do?" And her response was, "Nothing. I just want people to know where I am in case Dateline shows up. Unless we end up in a Dateline situation," was her exact words. But my question is, who would show up for you? And then I want you to think about who you know is the most religious people in your life. Your friends and the religious ones. And I asked the question, would they show up for you? Oh, that's a little bit of a gut punch when you think of it like that. So I guess it doesn't matter about the t-shirts, the bumper stickers, who carries their Bible and who does those things, and what they say as opposed to what they do. So if you want to join me scripture-wise today, we're going to be dealing with a lot of Mark chapter 7. And it starts out, as usual, Jesus is teaching. They're gathered in the temple or the city square, and the Pharisees are Phariseeing. The teachers of the law are nitpicking because they're looking for a reason to beat their chest and say, "I'm not like them, I'm better than you. Because I follow the rules better than you," because they were religious people, concerned with image and concerned with status, because that equaled wealth, some power, and some things like that. And I'm kind of picking up in I think it's verse 5, and I'm going to paraphrase in Britt's way. But they go up to Jesus and they go, why do your disciples defile themselves before they eat? And I'm like, what? Defile? Huh? That sounds kind of harsh. And so that's the Greek word is koinos there, I believe is what it is. And it means unholy, common, impure, unclean. But what was happening is that in the Pharisaical world, they had a ritual that they did in front of everyone to say, I'm a Jew and I'm a good Jew, and I'm up the list a little bit. And so they had a lot of pomp and circumstance and ceremony to be clean. And then they would look down at the uneducated or the unknowing or the non-Jews, and they would look down upon them for not doing what they did. And they'd laugh and they'd talk about them behind their back, and they'd point and, look, they're unclean, or if it was just a commoner, the things that go along with that. And so in verse 5, Jesus says, so the Pharisees and the teachers of the law asked Jesus, why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders? Instead, they're eating their food with defiled hands. So why aren't they doing our man-made traditions, following our man-made rules? Because this is not a part of, nowhere in the Ten Commandments to say, thou shalt wash your hands before you eat. But when you go into the 600 plus sub-laws that were created and handed down to separate the Jews from the rest of the people in the Middle East and to create their culture and then to ensure their survival as a tiny minority, to be set apart, then there's more rules and more clarifications, and then you'd have somebody at the temple that says, well, you need to publicly do this, and then they just took something extremely simple and vastly complicated as only man can do. And Jesus replies, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites, as it is written, these people honor me with their lips, or their bumper stickers, or their t-shirts, or their Bibles, or their clothes, or their Facebook statuses, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. Now think about those religious people. Are they worshiping in vain because the rules are more important than the message? The status, who they are, where they go, what they're a part of? Then Jesus continues on in debate and verbally undressing the Pharisees in front of everyone. And he talks about a tradition, they call it, it's listed here, Korban or Korban is a tradition, and that's where the Pharisees or the wealthy would then set apart they would take their fortune, their estate, their personal effects, and say it's dedicated to God. And then when their parents needed help because they gotten older or they needed financial or they needed support, they'd say, I can't help my parents because that would be taken away from God because I've dedicated all that I have to God. So they would then break the commandment of Moses of honoring thy father and mother, and then use a self-serving preservation of their own stuff with a little loophole, and they would use the law to their advantage to look good, but on the inside they were rotten. They weren't doing good, but they were trying to look good. And he calls them out on it. And I've heard many ministers say that this is forgetting this is basically upholding the commandment or the law, but missing the intent of the commander. Missing what Jesus had called them to do. It's kind of like when we were talking about a couple weeks ago when the woman was caught in the act of adultery and he wrote on the ground. Man, those people were they were within bounds to stone that woman right there in the courtyard. They had everything they needed to do it. But that was not the intent of the law, nor was it the intent of the commander for her to be stoned there. That's why he said, hey, who's without sin cast the first stone. And then we don't know what else he wrote on the ground, but it must have been some pretty incriminating stuff because they all dropped their rocks and left. So from this point forward, if I'm upset with someone, I am no longer going to say kick rocks. I'm going to say drop rocks. So you know how that needs to go. So Jesus embarrasses them because he quotes Scripture, quotes Isaiah. He dresses them down in front of everyone. And then he kind of sends them on their way, especially when it comes to how they're treating their parents, their elders, using their loophole and not doing what they need to be doing. We see this every day in the modern church. I'm not going to help that person because. I can't give to that homeless person because they might misuse it. I can't associate with that sinner that God loves because God hates the sin. Love the sinner, hate the sin. Now you can fill in the blank, whatever makes your juices flow. But that's the same thing that we see happening in the modern church. Well, I can't condone that. So they don't do. When, like the Pharisee asked him, who is my neighbor? Your neighbor's not who votes like you, who loves like you, who worships like you, who believes like you. Your neighbor is everyone. But this is what the Pharisees do. They get legal. They're lawyers, legalistic. I want you to think about it. How have you heard, what have you heard or seen? Or what are you guilty of that you've done yourself? That you shy away from doing what you know you should do, and then you justify your bad behavior with a loophole. Been there, done that. Probably this morning. But then we get into the meat of the matter and we got to figure out, how do we move forward past that? We're fighting a double-edged sword. And by we're, I mean those of us in this room. Because I don't think any of you are like those people. But how those people out there are affects how others see us too. Because we're guilty by association, even though anybody with eyes can differentiate. We did a trunk or treat yesterday as a church. How many of our children walked the line and actually got candy? I'm thinking like 3. Haley, Amanda's daughter, Dottie's 2 boys, grandsons. And then the rest of the children that we gave candy to and we gave food to and we gave everything else were not ours. We weren't, we got dirty. We hunkered down and we served. I had lots of people thank us for doing that. They didn't get charged. They got to eat for free. They thought it was really cool that a church served their community in that way, because how many churches do we know say, we can't do something for Halloween, that's the devil's night. Because they missed the fact that by not doing something, they're violating what Christ told them to do. And they're using the loophole to justify it, to discriminate, to not serve or not do. Well, we can't do that because that's not going to be people that we'd want to join our church because they're celebrating Halloween. Or they're just looking for free stuff. That all ties together. So Jesus talks to them about the Corban. Korban, however you say it. He dresses them down a little bit, and then Jesus calls the crowd in closer to him because they're snickering and they're laughing. He just put the Pharisees in their place. They tried to get him. He got them. They lost. They're mad. They leave. They go do some more plotting against him. Jesus called the crowd to him and he said, listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. I'm on verse 15, by the way. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them. After he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about this. I can just imagine what it was like dealing with Jesus. I think he's my kind of guy. Because he looks at them. They ask him about this, and he looks at them. Because remember, they've been entrenched in this religious system. They don't get it. They can't figure it out. They've been told what you touch, what you eat, that's what makes you unclean. They were all, we forget that the apostles were all Jewish. There were no Gentiles amongst them, no non-Jews. And they don't get it. And Jesus just looks at them point blank and says, are you dull? You are not the sharpest knife in the drawer, the brightest crayon in the box, sharpest tool in the shed. Are you dull? Are you dim-witted? He asked. Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body? He has to break down the digestive cycle here for them. In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean, by the way, for, Steve, for if you have any relatives you need to clarify this with. Jesus then goes on. What comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. And then this translation says sexual immorality. There's a lot of different things that kind of go into this. But also that same word can mean idolatry. It also can mean a couple of other things between adultery and other things that are happening. And I think that's important to know because a lot of times people hear sexual immorality and the first thing they want to jump to is the clobber verses about homosexuals, or they want to jump into that. And that this sexual immorality does not apply to that. It talks about adultery. It's talking about lust from both sides. It's talking about incest, and then also younger and older relations. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly or foolishness or stupidity. You don't get a pass for those. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. So Jesus is saying that what defiles the person is what comes out of them. Because what comes out of your mouth and the actions that you take are a direct reflection of your heart. Now, you can say that you follow Jesus with your mouth. You can use your hands to put the bumper sticker on the car. And I really I love to watch road raging Christians that have the Bible verse bumper sticker and then drive like Dale Earnhardt or somebody. I mean, just losing it. We sit there and we see that those actions or the fruit that they bear is how we determine. So, that leads me into, if you were being convicted of being a follower of Jesus, I think that if your evidence that they have against you is not loving your neighbor, not serving your neighbor, not being discriminate based on, judging them based on what they've done wrong or what you feel is wrong or imposed upon them, then you are right there. But we know that group that if we were to share this with them, it'd be lost upon them. Because they're going to take salvation or being reconciled to the Creator. They're going to take that as a personal transaction. They're going to say, I've done it. I'm good, and then they're going to watch the world around them go to hell in a handbasket. They're going to watch someone be mistreated and not speak up. Or they're going to watch someone be unjustly treated, be abused, be hurt, be exiled, excommunicated, excluded. And then they're going to say, oh, well, the Bible says that's okay. And they forget that Jesus didn't say it was okay. They're going to quote Paul and say, well, Paul says this. Guess what? Does it make sense that Jesus had 12 disciples that traveled the world with him? And then he did such a poor job of what he was doing while he was here teaching everything that he had to have a miraculous confrontation of a guy on the road to Damascus that had been out there killing Christians? There's a gap there I need to study and learn more about. But I'm going to take the words in red over anything else. And Jesus didn't make any bones about who was our neighbor or what we're to do. A lot of people will make Christianity about being good, about following the rules. Does it make sense to follow the rules of somebody who was a rule breaker? That came to fight the establishment? That came to fight for the poor, the sick, the marginalized, the cast out? It just doesn't seem like a guy that's going to hand down a bunch of rules. So I guess as a church, we should get kudos for being unruly. Because that's what we were called to be. What comes out of your heart is what defiles you. The Pharisees did not like that because it takes out some of their clout and some of their control, some of their ability to dictate how things go. There are modern churches today that won't like hearing that because they think it's about the image, they think it's about the show, they think it's about what they put forward. When in reality, it's what's in our heart and what comes out that will tell if we're sanctified, if we're clean, if we're reconciled. Doesn't matter. You've heard me say this. This is a good old Western Kentucky redneck analogy. I can have a pear tree and I can hang a sign on it that says an apple tree all day long, but guess what? When I pull that fruit off of the limb and I bite into it, what am I going to get? It's not going to be an apple. It's going to be a pear. And I'm thankful that I'm with a group of people that understand what their fruit is. You see it by what we do. And I'm thankful to be a part of that. And so the challenge is that we have to do more of it so that we set ourselves apart from the group that's out there that's not, even though we may bear the same name. You know, there's people that are out there right now, today. They've got church hurt. They've been Pharisee. They've been legalized. They've been abused. They've been beaten down. The Bible is nothing but a battering ram to them. They'll question whether Jesus even existed because of they've been so jaded and upset and hurt that they've done everything they can to discredit the book. It's not perfect. It's not inerrant. It's not complete. But it's the best thing that we have that gives us an idea of what Jesus came to do. And when we made the decision to become a follower of Christ, we agreed to do what he called us to do. So it doesn't matter what the bumper sticker says, what the t-shirt says, or what the sticker on the bottle says, that we let that speak for us. When who we are and what we do tells everyone everything they need to know about us as believers. And that's what we need to share more about. I saw a Facebook post a couple weeks ago. One of those made me mad. And it was about the persecution of the modern church in the United States. About why do people make fun of us? And why can't you just leave me alone and let me have my beliefs? My cousin commented on it, and she shared. It was one of those that really showed that a lot of our believers are dull because they just hit the forward button or the copy button and they just reshare, do whatever. And as I read down through this, and it was talking about being made fun of and being discriminated against, and all of these transactions that are really imagined and self-imposed by believers, and how they are so mistreated because they're fighting for Jesus. And that they shared this status because they were defending their Christian beliefs. Let me tell you what needs to be defended? Hypocrisy. That's what needs to be defended. You want to know what else needs to be defended? False teachings need to be defended. When you say you are one thing, but the truth of your heart comes out and shows that you're another, that requires defense. That's what is mocked. That's what the world looks down upon and comes to your door and says, Jesus said this, and you're doing this. Oh, you're judging me. That's not fair. You're persecuting me. We live in a world today in the United States, regardless of what you believe politically, where you're at. We're here today. I have no fear of going out and being arrested. I have no fear of anything happening to me because of my faith in Jesus Christ. We're not persecuted. But I'll tell you this, the true believers of Jesus are a very much smaller minority than anybody wants to think. There may be 2.5 billion that profess, but how many of those actually live? Love, service, humility, kindness, putting yourself out for the sake of others, never needs to be defended. It requires no defense. If you want to think you're attacked and you're being put down upon, that's not true. Because if you're following teachings of Jesus, there's no defense for it. There's no attack for it. Because when you go back and you think about that person on your friends list that you'd call if you were in that thing, can you think of a reason to attack them? I can't. And I'm thankful that I can count people around me today in that group. And so now our job is to go out and show what it really is, what we're here for, and what it means. And know that we're going to have to fight some outside noise because of what the others are doing. Getting ready to have the song of invitation, our discipleship hymn, I think is what it's called. I want to thank everyone that's joined us online today. If you have questions about our church, message Matt. We'll take care of that. Or if you get really crazy bold and you want to come visit us, we're here every Sunday at 10:30, and we have various stuff going on through the week. But we'd love to have you. If you're in that group that you want to see what it's really about, don't care what you look like, don't care where you live, what you got, who you love. All we care about is that you come be a part of us. Let's have our closing prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for being here today. We thank you for the love that we have in our hearts and that we're able to show all that we can. Thank you for every opportunity that you give us to be your arms, to be your hands, to be your feet, and to show all of them that we come encounter with what Jesus means to us by how well we choose to follow him. Be with those that are hurting, be with those that need you and just ask that they find their way to you and find their way to a group that'll love them, care for them, and show them how to be more like you each day. In your son's holy name, amen.